Hello, I'm Vicki Gabereau. Every year, thousands of kids are labeled learning disabled when actually they just learn differently. On the show today, you're going to meet really a remarkable woman who has become a guru for families and educators involved with children's learning problems. Her name is Barbara Arrowsmith Young. Her school is the Arrowsmith School. Her results are nothing short of spectacular. I hope you can stay tuned. Barbara Arrowsmith Young, good name, huh? Spent most of her life struggling to learn the things that most people just take for granted. At the age of 27, for example, she couldn't read the face of a clock. Now, conventional treatment didn't help her, so she just invented her own. Today now she helps hundreds of people, particularly young ones, with learning problems, and that all happens at her school, the Arrowsmith School in Toronto. So I'm ever so pleased to have Barbara Arrowsmith Young here today. Were you late for everything that you couldn't read a clock?
No, I compensated by being early, so I would show up half an hour early for everything, which
Yes.
was a waste of time.
Coping mechanisms.
Absolutely.
But you could read a clock with numbers. It was the round clock,
It was
the analog clock.
I could read the digital, but when I was growing up, they didn't have digital clocks.
Right.
So I was stuck.
Yes, so you would fake it.
I would fake it. And I would ask people at the time.
But did people think that you had a learning disability, or they thought you were gifted, in fact?
Well, in grade 1, many, many years ago, in the early 50s, there wasn't even a concept of a learning disability. So what my parents were told was that I had a mental block. And
A mental block.
A mental block. And being concrete myself, I thought I actually had this square cube in my head that interfered with learning. It was a block.
There was this little square thing in there somewhere.
That's right, that made it so that I couldn't learn.
So, but they had an idea, but you were so good at so many things. I mean, why would you were given some sort of label, and heaven knows when that was, probably the 70s, learning disabled, gifted. Well, that's a lot of things to have to deal with.
That certainly came out in the 70s, but you know, in grade 1, I did know that I didn't learn the way other people did, because I wrote the wrong way, I read the wrong way, I had
Backwards?
trouble learning. I wrote everything backwards. Everything was mirror writing.
Mirror writing?
Yes, everything, completely. And then, given that I would write the wrong way, I would drag my hand over it and make it a mess, so the teacher felt that I was doing this, yes,
on
deliberately,
purpose.
on purpose. Just didn't understand mathematics, just struggled in school. Grade 3, learned the strategy of sticking the thermometer on the light bulb to give myself a fever so I could miss half of the school, because we were getting into writing at that point.
Cunning.
Very cunning. So just developed a lot of strategies to avoid what I couldn't do. And then also spent a lot of time with flashcards. My parents were
Desperately trying to help you.
Absolutely. And there weren't psychologists at that time. There weren't remedial programs. So it was just doing the best that one could. And eventually I learned to compensate. So I learned to read in the right way and to write in the right way, but always knew that I was depending on my memory, which was phenomenally good, but I didn't understand anything, and always feeling that I was a fake or a fraud, or that I would get caught out.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people think that, don't they? Especially women, young women, they think that, and then you have this added component. What could you learn?
I could memorize just about anything.
Yeah.
I could look at a page in my textbook and almost memorize it verbatim.
But you could memorize it, but you didn't know what it said.
No, I didn't understand it. So I would pray then when I went to write an exam that if I looked at the question, somewhere in that question would be an element of what I'd memorized, so I could match what
So you could Rolodex the page.
That's right.
And then see it there, and then write it down.
And then click it in. But then I still wasn't sure that I'd understood, so when I walked out of a test or an exam, I didn't know would I get 10% or would I get 90%, had I matched correctly.
And what kind of percentages did you get?
Anywhere from 10% to 90%.
So you would get 90% in one class, and the next day you would get 10%. And they must have thought, what is wrong with this girl? Somebody must have.
Well, they thought that maybe I hadn't tried hard enough when I got the 10%, because they assumed that the 90% was the more accurate score, so I hadn't studied.
It was capricious.
Absolutely.
And you had friends, obviously, when you were a kid and you went to school with, and they were functioning reasonably normally. Did they think that you were the odd girl out?
Well, because of the learning disability I had, it also affected my relationships with other people.
Right.
So because I couldn't understand, I could have one friend at a time, but I couldn't handle more than that because it just took me so much energy to figure out people and to understand what was going on around me. So most of them didn't really know because I hid it very well.
Do you ever see those childhood friends now?
Yes, I do.
And has anyone ever said to you, you were an odd duck?
They said in some ways
Yes.
that I stood out, and I was very clumsy because I had a...
Yeah. What was that all about? Do you bang into things now?
Not now, because I've worked on that area, but I used to. I could shove this hand in a drawer, and if I wasn't looking, I would feel pain but not know where it was coming from. My mother figured that I wouldn't live beyond age 4 because I was so accident-prone and so
Walking
clumsy.
in front of things.
That's right. That's right. And I couldn't use this hand, really. It was almost
Well, you kept slamming it in the door.
That's right.
No, but...
Or putting it on the hot burner by accident.
Oh, really?
Yes, and not registering, knowing there was pain, but not registering immediately because the whole sense perception of touch and where pain was coming from on the left side of my body. And I would dent the car on the left side as well because it was an extension.
And you
of
don't
the
do that
body.
anymore?
No, I don't.
Okay, so are all of those things, the inability to recognize symbols, the math problems, all the things that you've just mentioned, are they all the same thing?
No, I believe that I had a number, sort of stopped counting after about 5 for myself, but about 5 areas of deficit.
Is that high?
No, the kids that I see in my school, 5 is pretty much the average. I don't see kids if they have less than 5 because they're managing to compensate or cope. I see kids in some of the school projects that I work in that have up to 10 or 11, and they're the ones that are really struggling.
Yeah. When you were 27, what happened? That's a long time. You were in university. You managed to get into university.
I did.
Some of us didn't even manage that. You know, I mean, because you can be beaten down. One is beaten down by this.
Well, I think I came from a family where it was just expected that
You
one
had
would
to.
go
You
to
did,
university.
yeah.
That's right. So it was never really an option. So again, I worked like sleeping 4 hours a night, and the whole rest of the other 20 hours would be trying to memorize everything from one end to the next. So, sadly, it says something maybe about our educational system, but I could get through on memory, but never understood what I was memorizing.
What you were actually doing. So when you think of a woman parallel to you, who didn't have the family support and the expectations of going to university and so on, I mean, you might just fall, you could very well just fall by the wayside. Many do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll be right back with Barbara Arrowsmith Young. I'm with Barbara Arrowsmith Young, who has developed one of the most advanced schools for learning in the entire world. So I thought you'd like to take a look at what her hard work has accomplished. This is the Arrowsmith School in Toronto. Arrowsmith's unique method of dealing with learning disabilities helps smart kids like Dan. Saved, even, his parents might say. Dan used to act out a lot because he couldn't read or write. He had the language skills of a preschooler. But after 3 years at Arrowsmith, he's at the grade 4 level, and next year Dan will return to public school in grade 7.
I know, how to read better. I know I'm much better at my math, my English.
And what I think this work is doing is just like physiotherapy for weakened muscles, but it's therapy for weakened brain areas.
This is a handwriting sample of one of Arrowsmith's early students. In 15 months, he progressed from a juvenile scribble to a perfect script. Today, he's a venture capitalist. With success like this, word is spreading. Weary parents in many parts of Canada are pushing to get Arrowsmith techniques taught in public school systems across Canada. It's really an amazing thing. So, Barbara, middle name Arrowsmith, what a great name, and a great name for your school, huh? Was that a maiden name of somebody?
It was my father's mother's maiden name, and actually she was originally from British Columbia,
right?
Creston.
Oh, yeah, that's a great place, Creston. But Arrowsmith is such a perfect name for your school, too. Yeah, I really like it. All right. What happened to you at age 27, really, that opened the door for you to figure out how to train yourself, how to learn?
I was at graduate school, and I was
at graduate school
studying school psychology,
yes,
and going to all my professors and saying that I had a learning disability, and they couldn't accept that because I was managing to function.
Right, you're a slacker.
That's right. So met another student who is my ex-husband, and he introduced me to the work of Luria. He introduced me to a book called The Shattered World. And
Happen to have it here.
Yes, and I read that book. This is a story of a man who had traumatic head injury to the specific area where I had my learning deficit. And it was for the first time reading that, I thought, I'm not crazy. All of the symptoms that I'm experiencing are related to a deficit in a specific brain area. So I thought, maybe if I could understand what that area does, and then there's a line of research coming out of California, a man named Rosenzweig, who was looking at stimulation of function with animals. So I thought if you could identify the area, you must be able to find an exercise that would make it work without the support.
Like train it as you would an athlete.
That's right. Or in physiotherapy where they retrain weakened muscles. And in one of his sections, he talked about how with that area you couldn't read a clock. So the first exercise I created was wearing a digital watch and an analog watch on my wrist and quickly looking at them while I realized that that wasn't going to be enough. And then made a whole exercise based on clock faces, making myself read them, get more accurate more quickly, and now have a program that goes up to seeing the relationship between 10 hands on a clock that can give anybody a mental workout.
I guess so. I don't even want to try this. But the children that come to your school, is the clock reading, although the analog clock almost being a thing of the past, that may not be, you may not be able to see it when that kind of thing would appear in a kid. If you have a kid that can read, a clock, what do they call those kind of clocks?
The
digital clock, yeah. Okay, so if you have a kid that reads a digital clock, you're not going to worry about him not being able to read an analog.
But it's not so much that it's not the aspect of just reading the clock, it's what that means, like why they can't read the clock. So still in most of the schools, the kids are taught how to read the analog clock.
Yes.
It's the fact that the brain area is weak that sees the relationship between ideas, which then means that they can't understand meaning. So they can't hold concepts, they can't reason in mathematics, they have trouble with reading comprehension, they get to the end of something they've read and they can't really remember the beginning or hold the details together. So the clock was just sort of a surface feature of the overall deficit.
Right.
And that was just one of the areas that I had. I had a whole other exercise for the kinesthetic activity where I was clumsy and falling and denting the car and denting my body. I would be bruised always on the left side of my body. And that was an exercise with my eyes closed, having to trace over complex Chinese characters, but with your eyes closed. And the only way you can do that is through sense of touch. And I did it with my left hand. And it worked on that area that knows how far your muscles have moved in space.
It's an inspired idea, really. I mean, it's almost like a bolt of lightning, was it not? Like the great light bulb goes on over your head about how to train yourself?
It did, but when I first did it, though, I didn't know whether it would work.
Of course
I thought, not. What do I have to lose other than time? And
you tried everything else.
I had tried everything else.
Nothing worked.
No, I'd done all the color coding, like parsing sentences, all of the standard compensations, and I still had the deficit.
How many people do you think, especially young people, I mean adults I'm concerned about, but young people in particular, in this country are experiencing what you experienced?
The common wisdom is that there are about 10% of the population that has learning difficulties.
That's a lot.
Yes.
So a greater or lesser degree?
That's correct.
Okay. You are the only school that does your method?
Yes, but I have now my program out in 6 schools in the publicly funded school system in Ontario, in the Toronto region, and 5 private schools in the sort of greater Toronto region, outside of Toronto.
Right. Well, there are a lot of people here today that would like to see it here. You train teachers, then?
I do train teachers.
How long does it take to train them?
It's a 2-week training process. And
2 weeks? You can train them to train these people in 2 weeks?
To get them up and running.
That's fairly cost-effective.
In 2 weeks. And we have detailed training manuals, and we're working on creating video training manuals at this point.
All right, if you can't write, and you saw a little bit in that footage about, but let's take an example of the handwriting. This is a boy in February the 16th this year who wrote in this way. Okay. And then how much later?
This is June.
Okay, June, a few months later, this is what it now looks like. Still chaotic. But you say it's better. It's
better. Well, there are more words going down on page, so there's more of a flow going down, and it's better organized.
And spacing. Then here is
November.
Look at that kid. He must be so proud of himself.
He's very proud of himself, and he likes writing now, whereas before he hated writing.
Of course, because it drove him crazy.
That's correct, because he couldn't get the thoughts out of his head onto the paper.
That's right. So his thoughts drifted to, I wish I could get out of here, and I think I will.
Yes.
Why am I with this kid? I'll be right back. Barbara Arrowsmith Young remains. She is the founder of the Arrowsmith School for kids who just learn differently. That's a better way rather than saying disabled. You can't say enabled, but you can say differently. LD, learning differently.
Yes.
Okay, fine. 1980 you did this. How many students first year?
I think we had 6 or 7. So
How did you find
small.
them?
They came through the Y testing service. There was someone there that knew about our work, and these were sort of adolescents that were struggling in high school and knew that they couldn't go on to college or university because of their deficits.
Most schools, however, not most, I rephrase that. Many schools pass students not ready to move on to the next grade because they haven't got the capacity to keep them back and redo it with them.
That's correct. They call it social promotion. It's better to keep them
social
promotion with their peers. Group because they don't really feel a lot of what they're doing is effective in terms of turning the learning disability around. So it's better that at least they're within their peer group and moving through. But certainly now in Ontario, there's a grade 10 literacy test that has just been put into place. And if you can't pass that, you will not get your high school leaving certificate. So there's a big concern right now, as how that's going to affect kids with learning disabilities.
No kidding.
They won't pass that test.
And they're going to be panicking.
Yes.
Because if they've been faking it.
This is going to show it.
Yeah, okay. I thought you might be interested in looking at an example of one of the exercises, and you might have seen in that footage before the kid with the eye patch. Now, you did the eye patch thing, and then you did, I don't know what characters these are, what language this is, but you use non-English languages and the characters we don't use, so that you're not mixed up with the meanings.
That's correct. You want to take away all the compensations that a child would normally use, so you don't want them to be able to put language to this or put meaning to this. You want to be working just on the visual motor area. So the child has an eye patch. They've got the left eye patch.
You always cover the left eye?
For this exercise.
Yes.
Because the right eye motor movements talk to the premotor region over here in the other hemisphere, and they're tracing on this with a red pen, and we use the red on the green because it's the contrasting color. So
and it's almost 3D as well.
That's right. So it'll show whether they're on or not. And the idea is it's like the motor planning for the child that can't write. And the goal is eventually to be able to do a series of these lines with no red showing out completely and within a certain time limit, and then we move them through progressively more difficult levels, and it works on the area related to translating thought into the written process.
Right, so the results of doing this exercise, and that would be, what you've just seen would be the first one, and then this is a second one, which is a more abstract and convoluted maze-like thing. That is not a language.
No, that's not a language. I made that up.
You made that up.
I made that up.
This is the way your mind looks, is it?
That's the way my mind looks.
This is frightening.
That's right.
So what would be the result of this practice?
This is where you see the change in handwriting. So you see that the child that can start to get uniformity in the writing, but it's more than that. I mean, the handwriting is now more legible, but actually more content goes down on page because it's almost like this area is a block. They've got the ideas, but the translation from the brain into the written process, they talk about it doesn't come out the end of the pen.
Right.
So it's the child that has to write the essay, and they're sitting there at their desk for 2 hours, and maybe one sentence goes down on page. So what you see is the flow of writing changes as well as the organization and legibility.
What about people that don't know who, what, when, where, why, what? Certain blocks of words. They can't see. They all look like the same word. What is that called?
In terms of reading?
Yeah.
There's an area sort of back here that's related to visual memory for symbol patterns. And for that, I've created a different exercise. This is, if someone's good here, they can close their eyes, think of the word cat, and they can see it as if it's on a blackboard. A child that has a deficit here can't hold the visual image of the word. So it affects spelling, it affects reading. So I have a computer program where they're memorizing these kind of symbols in 27 different languages, starting with one simple symbol, going up to memorizing 8 Chinese characters.
Right.
By the time they can do that, their whole capacity for visual symbol learning in reading, in spelling, even in mathematics, because it's, and I've had kids that couldn't learn like chemistry equations that can now do it because they can hold the symbol pattern.
Right, and it has absolutely nothing to do with IQ.
No.
In fact, many of your students have very high IQs.
Yes, a lot of them would be gifted LD.
Yes, gifted LD, like you.
Yes.
How much does it cost to go to your school?
It's $15,000 a year.
Yeah. That's a lot, for some parents.
It is a lot, and that's why I was so committed to putting it into a publicly funded system in Ontario, where the parents there don't have to pay anything for the program.
Right.
They just have to be in that school and be identified as having learning disabilities.
Would you do an assessment so that?
Yes, we
that's the
go
first step.
on-site and we
Oh,
assess.
you go on-site.
And we also assess for children that are coming into my school to identify, out of the 19 areas that I can currently work on, what is the profile for that individual. And I'm also clear that the 19 areas that I currently work on aren't everything that exists that can go wrong with learning.
Yes.
Absolutely.
You're a happy woman.
I feel satisfied. I'm passionate about what I do.
Really?
Yes.
That was hard to gauge. All right. So you can get some information, more information, anything you ever wanted to know about Arrowsmith School from their website, which is www.arrowsmithschool.org. Back in a minute. I'd like you to meet Karsten Brandvold now, joining me and Barbara Arrowsmith-Young. He is an ever so clever 17-year-old guy. He goes to West Vancouver High School. He's already wiggling around. His ability to learn has been difficult, to say the least. He's hoping the Arrowsmith program will be available to him and to others in this neighborhood soon. And so how are you, Karsten?
Good, how are you?
I'm fine. So here we are talking about how hard it is for you to learn. Is that, you find that difficult to talk about?
No. It's very difficult to learn, though. I can tell you that.
Yes.
What's a good example here? Let's think. How about when I'm learning in math class? The teacher will go over the question about 50 times. I don't know. Maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but we'll go over a question for a half an hour at least, right?
With you in particular?
Yeah. And I figured it out. I know how to do it now. So, the teacher will leave me, and I'll try to do it. I open to the page, and it's like French to me.
Right, it's like you've never seen it before.
Oh, no clue.
That would make you very anxious.
Yeah, it's very frustrating.
Yes,
very frustrating.
and it's been this way your entire school career.
Yes.
Yeah. You're quite well behaved in school. Did you act up? Were you naughty when you were little?
When I was younger, I think that because it was so hard to learn and memorize stuff, that prompted like behavioral problems. But now that I understand what the problem is, I don't get frustrated anymore.
But you went to school here.
Yes.
You went to the Fraser School, and they made huge leaps and bounds for you.
Oh, yeah.
In what areas in particular?
Well, I had fallen behind like 2 years. Like when I went into grade 6, I was at a grade 4 reading level. So by the end of grade
Take your hand
8,
down so I can see your face.
By the end of grade 8, I had made up like 4 years in 2.
Right.
And then I was able to go back to public school and join my friends again.
That must have been a great relief for you.
Yeah, it was.
How do your teachers treat you? Well, probably quite well now, but perhaps in the past. I don't know. Maybe it's not so great. I don't know.
Some teachers have been pretty ridiculous. Like a good example of how I've been treated is just a little while ago, actually. I'm currently taking math by correspondence, math 11, because you need math 11 to graduate. And some of the teachers in the school think that I can't function properly or complete the test, even though I'm getting 97 percentile in the course, like work.
They don't see you do it.
No, so they tried to put me into a Math 11A class, which is much lower form, right, in the school to guarantee that I'm going to graduate just because I have a learning disability. They don't think I can. So it's almost like racism in a way. It's the only way I can describe it.
Yes, that you are dismissed, ignored, treated poorly.
Like, there goes the learning disabled kid. You know?
The teachers say this?
No, the teachers don't say that directly, but
yeah, you feel that.
Yeah, you can tell when people are...
You're in I hated this part. This sort of a class that is dedicated to helping people that have a crisis in learning. You are with others in this situation, or yeah?
Yes.
And do you feel ghettoized by that?
Not really. It's a really good environment. Like I do get a lot done in there, but it's just the label that's given to it is not. It's like it's the special kids class. Only the special kids go there. You know.
And it's and you feel left. I don't know, kind of left out in the cold by that kind of label.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you were amalgamated into the regular program of schooling, you would be terribly frustrated, would you not?
Fall behind. Yeah.
Yeah, are you, Barbara, just while we're on this, is integration a good idea, or is it better for him to be in a class that's separate?
Certainly there's a lot of movement towards integration, but often an individual with a learning difficulty can't get all their needs met when they're integrated in a class with 30 other students. So often taking them out for part of the time to address their specific needs, as Karsten is talking about, and then having them integrated in areas that they can function in.
Right. Do you think that when you're older that you might actually pursue the teaching of others when you've learned all the things?
You know what, possibly, yeah.
It'd be a good thing to do, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
even if you didn't do it forever. Yeah. Apparently you're really, really good with putting a motor back together.
Yeah, actually.
Good. What are you doing on Saturday? No, but those kind of things is where you have found great success, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, three-dimensional stuff is my strong point. Anything that has to do with two-dimensional, like writing, anything that has to do with writing on a page, or anything that's two-dimensional, I get confused with. I can't remember. But when it comes to three-dimensional things like an engine and putting pistons in it and stuff, it's no problem. I pick it up in my mind's eye and spin it around, and it's no problem.
Oh, really? You might be good at computer animation in that case. A sculptor.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you have lots of friends, so you are. You've never pulled back socially, have you?
No, I think when I was younger, it was difficult in school, but it doesn't really affect me anymore. Like, we'll joke around about it, like, oh, super special kid, but it's no big deal.
Does it still sting, though?
A little, sometimes, if they really poke and prod, but, get over it. I learned different. No big deal.
You're just a charming guy. I only can see a bright future for you. I'm going to talk to your mother. She's going to come out. They must have been wringing their hands for many years, deeply concerned about you. Okay, I look forward to meeting her. Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad you came to talk to me. So we're quite the mob scene now. Karsten remains, as does Barbara. And now I'd like you to meet Teresa Brandvold. She is Karsten's mum. She and her husband have been through the ringer, trying to find the right school where Karsten can learn in his own way and then thrive. And I think you were quite successful here in Vancouver because things have obviously picked up. But you're very interested in the Arrowsmith School approach. Yeah. When did you first realize that he had problems?
Learning difficulty. Quite young. Preschool years, actually, was when I first...
Oh, really?
Yes.
Before you even tested, yeah.
It wasn't identified until about the end of grade 3. They don't generally do testing in the public system.
And what did it indicate?
Well, the phrase that was given at that point was difficulty with directionality of symbols.
I see, can't read.
Complicated way of saying, yeah.
Yeah.
Things flip around.
You were, I'm sure, worried, heartbroken, concerned.
At that point, we were told that it hopefully would be developmental and that he would grow out of it as he got older, but that didn't in fact happen. So, and then when he was in grade 4, they suggested that he probably also had an attentional deficit, which was diagnosed in grade 4. And we did a trial run of the whole Ritalin thing, which turned out to be a disaster for Karsten. It did help his learning curve. His learning curve shot straight up initially, but the side effects were very, very unpleasant, and he chose to go off, so we supported him.
What were the side effects? You were an emotional roller coaster.
Oh, yeah. It was awful.
Crying inappropriately, laughing inappropriately.
And insomnia, and stomach distress as well. So it's just the whole thing was too much for him.
How did you sleep?
Well, he didn't sleep very well.
No.
I was okay.
Were you not worried? I would have been worried sick.
Well,
yes?
It's something that you're sort of living with it. So you go through it day by day, each challenge that is sort of in front of you. You try to rise to the occasion and find out what you can to help your child. But
it becomes a life project.
It is. It's an ongoing concern, this ongoing communication with the school and various different strategies. We put him in the Sylvan program.
Yes.
And he did their phonics program, which helped him quite a bit. He had huge holes in his phonics. He had private tutor the next year. And then eventually, by the end of grade 6, he completely melted down. Grade 6 hit puberty. And we thought, this is not working. So we put him into Fraser Academy for grade 7 and 8.
And then leaps and bounds from there.
That was a big step forward, yes. That really helped him a lot. The structure of that school really helped him a lot. And he got the Gorton Gillingham tutoring every day.
Now, you would really like to see Barbara, well, you're sitting over there all by yourself, dear. You really like to see her program incorporated into BC schools and to be available here.
Well, it would be wonderful.
Yes. And what do you think that would add to him at this age, at this stage now?
Well, in fact, for Karsten, he'll be graduating this year. It wouldn't really help him to see it in public education. However, there's always the possibility of something for the late high school young adult student where they could just go on a fee basis and pay as they go, like you would pay to go to animation school or BCIT or anywhere else, and choose the Arrowsmith as a bridge to your post-secondary of choice.
Have you visited that school?
Aerosmith?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, you
no.
got it, I guess, hey?
I've just seen it on video.
Yeah, doesn't it look great?
It looks wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you didn't have these things to face when you were young, did you?
No, I didn't. No,
Right.
We're kind of putting the blame on his poor dad.
Aw. Did he?
Well, you know, in those days, they didn't really identify people as readily, and so it's hard to say. Karsten, I had a difficult birth process with Karsten, and that could be a contributing factor as well, because certainly I don't think his dad had a struggle to the degree that he has.
Right. But you can see similarities in the...
There are some, yes.
So it's pretty much all his fault. No, but I mean, you have to make a joke about this. You know, it's emotionally draining. This, it's a constant worry for parents. To say nothing of these kids, you must spend some time of every day dealing with the emotional toll.
With the pain that parents have. I mean, one mother once told me it's like grieving, because you know that these children don't have the future that you want for them. So every day you face that.
Are you feeling quite positive about it now?
Well,
You seem so great.
He's very strong,
Happy.
I think, and he's very social individual, has a very good network of friends and support system that way, as well as a strong family support. But I think that's what's so exciting about Barbara's program, is that it's not a compensating strategy. It's not, oh, well, we'll give you twice as long to do this test because you're having such difficulty decoding what the actual question is, but we will correct it so that you can do the test in a normal amount of time.
Right.
So
that
that's
you fit into the rest of the world.
Huge difference,
Yes.
because eventually all these layers and layers of compensation, they become too much for the individual to cope with.
Well, the all-time expert of compensation. She knows exactly how to do it.
Yeah, and you just get fed up, and the fatigue and...
Yes. Well, how do you, just if you can tell me in a second or so, how do you train people to speed up and get rid of that? We can do this in 2 hours as opposed to 1.
It depends on the area you're working at, but if you're working on the one that affects the writing process, it would be that tracing exercise that you see, and not only does more go down on paper, but it goes down much more quickly. It's the automatic translation of the thought into the written process. If you're working on auditory processing, which is more the reasoning and the grasping of the mathematics, as that area becomes stronger, the person can process in real time. They don't have to go over and over and over the information before they get it. So it's like building a strength in the brain so that then the learning can go forward without having to spend all that extra energy to try to go around or to try to compensate.
Could you send him stuff to practice now?
It doesn't really work that way. You need to really have trained people that are administering it, because it can be done incorrectly, and so it needs to be done properly.
Right. All right, we'll just take a break, and then we're going to... I'm so grateful for you coming. This is really great. Thank you. Will you stay, please? We're all still together. We're talking about learning disabilities, and we're going to take some questions from the audience because they are particularly keen. So we'll start with Sheila Houston. How are you? Hello.
Hi.
What's your question, and to whom is it directed?
At Barbara. I guess the question is, like, when a person works out and exercises, of course, they develop muscle tone and everything, but when they stop, it turns to flab.
So your brain turned to flab.
So my question is, if someone is doing the brain exercises to help them, I don't know, maybe with math concepts or something like that, to develop that part of their brain, when they stop doing the exercises after a year or two, would they lose it?
No.
That's a pretty good question,
That is a very good question. They don't, because really the brain doesn't work the way a muscle does, even though we kind of use that analogy. So what happens once it's reorganized and once the strength is there, it starts to get stimulated and worked by being able to be engaged with the rest of the brain areas. So it continues to have its own form of brain exercise by being reorganized. So I've tracked people 18, 19 years out of the program, and there's no drop-off of function.
I guess it's like you learn the alphabet at a certain stage. You never really forget the alphabet. Okay, would that be fair enough to say? Okay, David Chamberlain is next. Shoot.
Hello. Yeah,
Hello.
I'm curious to know why that we find some of the most simple tasks so difficult to do, and some of the most challenging ones very easy to do.
Mm-hmm. Good question. It's because the brain's very complex, and we have between 52 and 54 different areas in each hemisphere. So it's a possibility that you have strengths in areas that are related to doing complex tasks, but maybe weaknesses in some of the areas that are related to doing more routine tasks. So you can excel at certain things and not at others. And that's the power of understanding how the brain functions.
Like Carson being able to take an engine apart and so on. Yeah. It is useful to have around the house, though, isn't he?
He fixes my car.
He fixes your car.
Yeah.
I always wanted a child that could do that kind of thing. Or even a husband. Okay, Adrian Vervent.
I was wondering, how would you help somebody with processing difficulties in math?
With processing difficulties in math? There are a number of different exercises. If it's the reasoning or not understanding why you do what you do in mathematics, like the logic behind the procedure, then that's actually the clock exercise, because it's forcing reasoning and seeing relationships and connections. Then there's another area where the person can't hold numbers, so like making change, calculating inside their head, estimating number, having number sense, and that there's a whole exercise where the person does a series of sort of rapid mental calculations that get more and more difficult, and that works the area that holds number and operates on number, learning your times tables, all of that.
Does that help you?
Yep.
Do you have a problem with this?
Yep.
Yep. You working on it?
Yep.
Yeah. Good luck. Okay. Sladja Voprek.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question to Barbara, actually. As a person who is working with the kids, I would like to know how you can recognize and how you can determine that a kid or child is having a problem with learning. It's like learning differently. And what is the early age that you can recognize it?
You can really often recognize it by grade 1, or, you know, as Carson's mother said, I mean, she knew in preschool, because what you see is where the child can do certain things very, very well, and then there are other kinds of learning that they just can't do. So you see that discrepancy or that dichotomy where some things are easy and some things it's like they hit a brick wall, and that's usually the first sign where that parents see, and often, as I said, you can see it very, very early, grade 1, grade 2, that they aren't learning in certain ways the way you would expect them.
And I gather this is your situation. Yeah. Yeah, people don't ask things in a vacuum. No.
No, probably not.
Margaret, I know you're out there, Margaret Smith.
This is for Barbara. How can we convince school boards to bring into the schools the Arrowsmith program on a pilot project?
Good question. Parents have a lot of power. That's what made it happen in Ontario. I mean, first it was a principal that got interested, but it was really the voice of parents. I think a lot of times parents feel that they don't have power, but their collective voice really does. So, you know, it was a number of parents. They went to the director of education. They went to the superintendent of special education in a specific board there, and argued for this program, for it as a pilot to be put into initially one school to track and see how it worked. When we got positive results, then we moved to more schools, and we're now in 6 schools and starting a 7th. So it's the voice of parents fighting for their children.
Do you know how long that took?
In Toronto, it took about a year.
That doesn't seem very long, does it? Thanks, Margaret.
Thank you.
Thanks for your questions. I'd like to talk to you later on, young man. See if what can be done. You know, when you see somebody that's young and then asks a profound question like that, it sort of sticks with you, you know, and you think, God, you
want
must
to do something.
Yeah, you got to do something. Something's got to happen. Yeah. I mean, I got 2% in math, and no bloody well anyone helped me. And I feel very frustrated for him.
Yes.
And kind of helpless, as a matter of fact. In excess of $400 million is spent on special education in this province. It's a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And yet there's no program like this available in the public schools. Does anybody ask you to help develop this in British Columbia schools? That is, people that are on the inside. I know you're banging your head against the wall trying to get it organized here.
Well, there are a number of parents here that are working
are they all here?
on this. I think there are a number of them that are here.
Yeah.
And I think they're getting the ear of some people that are listening. Yes.
Well, there's no point in not listening to this, because the success is so evident. Mm-hmm. So you're going to learn how to do the email, and you're going to become Action Central, are you? For this, you really? What are you planning on doing?
Well, hopefully, getting enough support through other like-minded parents that we could get a pilot for the young adult, late high school young adult age group, because by that point, they're sort of out of the realm of the public education system, and you're not embroiled in that controversy about equal access and where's the money coming from and all those sorts of questions, which of course are very valid, but it could serve as a model to other people to sit up and take notice and say, hey, that's really working for that group. Maybe we should think about putting it in the public system as well, and diverting some of the funds that possibly are not being used as appropriately, that could be used more effectively. Because if the student goes through that program and after 3 years doesn't need all the kinds of assistance that Karsten has required through his entire education, tremendous expense to the school system and to his family, then it would be worthwhile to really look at it. A huge cost analysis needs to be done by the public system, I would think.
And when will you be learning the email? Are you coming over to my house for your email lesson?
Karsten's going to teach me. My 3 children are dragging me, kicking and screaming to the 21st century.
I got 2% in math. I figured out the email. Oh. You can do this. I'm not too helpful, am I? Anyway, it was wonderful that you could come out here, and I appreciate it so enormously, and I'm glad that we're all able to meet each other. And I'll talk to you in a minute. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. To Karsten and Teresa Brandwell for talking about their story, and in particular to Barbara Arrowsmith Young, who came all the way from Toronto. So you can get more information on the Arrowsmith School at arrowsmithschool.org.